Hi, I'm Matthew Sadler.
And I'm WIM Natasha Regan. In this video, we are looking at some games where Stockfish is black in the Steinitz French. Our main game is from the top of the tops, and TCEC and Leela is white and Stockfish is black. And in this game, it goes rather wrong for Stockfish, and we're going to look at what went wrong. In our other games, Stockfish is black against AllieStein and against Stoofvlees. And actually black does really rather well, gets draws in those games. We're going to look across these games of ideas where white plays an early a3. We're going to look at endgames with a good knight against a bad bishop for white. And also some plans where white puts the rook across on the third rank, advances the h-pawn, and activates the rook along the third rank. So there's lots to learn about the French Steinitz in here.
Exactly. It's been a very nice feature of this top of the top that you get a lot of games in the same opening played, by different engines, and it gives a very nice overview of a specific opening. So we did that already with 1b3 in our last video, where Stoofvlees showed how to play with black. Amazing ideas, sacrificing a piece. And here Stockfish is sort of giving us some ideas in the on the black side of the Steinitz French.
It's quite interesting, isn't it? Because Stockfish wasn't always a big fan of the French, but seems to have recently switched to choosing to play 1e6 against 1e4 on the first move in the choice.
Yeah, it's very surprising. I mean, traditionally, this has been, the opening that Leela scored very heavily in against Stockfish. In the recent season 18, Stockfish actually did a lot better in the French. It did lose some games, but it also won the reverse as white. So it wasn't really losing anything, and it also held some, some of the difficult positions, well as well. But it does feel a little bit odd that it's now choosing, 1e6. 1e6 in reply to 1e4, because you would have thought that there are other openings, 1e5 or 1c5 that it would play better. But maybe all this.
I think wouldn't, or AlphaZero certainly wouldn't have chosen 1e6.
No, it's
and favoured 1e5 and things like the Berlin defence.
Yeah, I mean the NNs are pretty consistent in playing 1e5 and the Berlin defence. Stoofvlees is the only exception that in these top to top games it also played some marshals, a marshal attack, which was pretty nice actually, and a nice bit of variety. But anyway, let's have a look at how this game started, and we'll get into all our stuff. So e4, e6, no TCEC book here, so the machines were just choosing what they wanted to play by themselves. Knight c3, d5, d4, knight f6, e5, knight fd7. Well, actually, was 1e4 specified? Maybe 1e4 was specified in the TCEC book. But anyway, 1e6 was Stockfish's own choice. f4, c5. And this is called the Steinitz variation, because Steinitz, great world champion, late 1800s, played this. He actually played an interesting plan with d takes c5. Very directly, going for the freeing of the d4 square, which could then be occupied by a piece. That was, his big concept. Nowadays, white plays mainly knight f3, but the idea is the same. After c takes d4, knight takes d4, we get a strong piece on d4, and we don't mind the the centre being slightly weakened, by removing the d4 pawn. So knight c6, bishop e3, and now Stockfish chose two different possibilities. In our main game, it played c takes d4, which is the old main line in actual fact. In one game against AllieStein, a very interesting game, which we're going to have a little look at, black played a6, which is the more modern line, one of the more modern lines, preparing b5 and queenside expansion. So how did Allie react? Well, Allie played a slightly odd move here. Allie played the move a3. And why is it odd? Well, it's just simply you struggle to really find the reason why it has to be played immediately. I mean, it can be a useful move. It stops b5 to b4 on the one hand. Also, after d takes c5, white can also play a move like b4, you know, trying to keep control of the c5 square. But on the other hand, you know, when black plays b5 to b4, it also gives black an easy way to open up the queen side. And, well, black is fighting up the queen on the queen side. So that's not, you don't feel that's going to be particularly unpleasant for black. And of course, as in the game, you know, when Allie castles queen side, being able to open the queen side like this very easily with b5 to b4 is quite useful. So it is quite strange to play this move immediately. I mean, from an NN, I might expect, you know, h4, you know, and of course the normal move is queen d2 in this position with a lot of theory on that. But it just feels, you know, right at this moment to play a3 does feel a little bit strange. Stockfish then played c takes d4 and bishop c5, and that's quite a reasonable idea. Transposing back into the old main lines, you know, what I said with c takes d4, bishop c5. But white and black have inserted a6 and a3. And in general, I mean, you know, a6 is a move that black's always going to play. a3 with white, you know, who knows? You might play it, but you might want to do something else rather than doing that. So, in principle, that's...
I suppose it could weaken the queen side, couldn't it?
Exactly, yeah, you know, it does weaken the queen side. Well, I'll show you one of my games recently not recently, but one of my games in this variation. You'll see, might see something quite funny about it. So queen d2, castles, and this strange move, but it is a typical French idea, to give up the dark squared bishop and then to play b5. What's the point of it? Obviously the knight on d4 was attacking the knight on c6, so b5 is impossible there. Knight d4, bishop d4, yeah, b5 is maybe not quite as easy to get in because, you know, after b4 you might have ideas like bishop takes c5. So yeah, the idea, you just take on d4 and b5, and also keep, you know, a knight for attacking the white queen side, which is not bad. You know, a knight on b4 will attack c2, as we'll see in the game actually. And this line with bishop takes d4 was played by Mikhail Gurevich, who's a big expert of in the French. But it was played even in positions where white hadn't played a3. So with that a3 move, you know, black is definitely going to get more counterplay. h4, queen e7. A slightly strange move actually, but we'll see again that Stockfish is tending to put its queen on e7 in these games. Normally you try and get your queen on a5 in actual fact and play b4 that way, you know, but this is not bad at all. h5, b4, takes queen takes, h6 and g6. And well, white's got its famous thorn pawn, its advanced rook's pawn on h6, which is obviously going to cause the black king some worry. You know, the dark squares are weakened.
We will see that pawn in other games as well. You'll note that the white player in the three games we look at changes. So, but whether it's AllieStein or whether it's Leela, that pawn gets up to h6. So
exactly. It's just a mannerism. It's just what they do. It's but although, you know, white's got this well, guarantee for future play, you could say. Black's also doing quite nicely. Queen's on b4, attacking the pawn on b2, rook on b8. There's also the open c file for play. You know, black's doing fine in this position, and well, you know, in such a position with counterplay and possible threats against the king, you know, Stockfish, whether it's the French or any other opening, Stockfish is going to be very dangerous. Well, AllieStein went for a sort of repetition actually. I think he was probably expecting the queen to go back to b4 here, but Stockfish played queen a5, which is quite interesting. And after knight b1, black played knight b4 with a little threat here. Quick, easy tactical puzzle. Yes. The threat is...
You maybe don't need to pause the video for this one. That's knight a2, checkmate.
Indeed. So black plays rook, white plays rook e1, just giving his king an escape square. Bishop b7. And now, as Natasha mentioned, we get quite a typical theme. Now, there's a game that we looked at from Division P of Season 18, I believe. It was Leela against Ethereal. And, well, in that game as well, we saw this heavy pieces on the third rank, just looking to interfere with Black's counterplay. You know, just opposing a rook on c8, or in this case, you'll see chasing away the queen from a5. Really something that they all tend to do a lot. I haven't really seen that much of it in human games. But, you know, quite interesting. In this way, it's with the rook on a3, it's well, much harder for Black to play a5 to a4. But you do have the feeling somehow that, yeah, this move on if you have to play a maneuver like, you know, you castle queenside, and then you play that former rook on a1, you play it e1, e3 to a3. You do wonder about, you know, the absolute value of having played a2 to a3 earlier. You know, that's just something that just keeps on coming back in my mind there. So a5, and now bishop b5, which I think again is a theme that we saw in Leela Ethereal. That White actually wants to swap off this light squared bishop for that knight on d7. Why is that? Well, that knight on d7 is the big defender of the kingside dark squares. And if you get rid of that knight on d7, then queen e1 to h4 to f6 could be very dangerous indeed. So Black does not allow that, knight c5. It's willing to give up the knight for the dark squared bishop, but not for the light squared bishop. King b1 rather, knight e4, great outpost for the knight. I mean, you can see Black's actually done really well in this position. Black's, you know, played this like a true French player, you have to say. And now rook b8. There's a lot of firepower on that against that white king, and the key weak point for white is this pawn on c2. So knight takes c4 allows queen takes c2 check, or probably, well, even knight c2 looks quite dangerous, but queen c2 certainly. So that makes it quite difficult for white to get free. And but what white does here is go queen h4, threatening knight e4, well, threatening a later queen f6 at some stage. And Black plays bishop a6. Now it's quite, you would have thought that maybe white could take, and go knight takes e4, queen c2 check, king a1, because the bishop on d4 is covering the pawn on b2. And after d takes c4, queen f6 looks, you know, at least fairly strong, at least some threats there. But Black's got a very strong idea. I'll give you the first move, queen c1. Now just try and work out what the tactic actually is here. What's the key point to it? You can maybe pause the video if you want. Rook c1, king a2, and we've got knight b4 check, king b3, and now the key discovered attack.
You can win that queen by knight to d5.
Exactly, and then you're just a huge amount of material up. So that's you know, one reason why white can't do that. So, but what white does is quite clever. Plays bishop a4. So the bishop now is defending c2. So this move, knight takes c4, is actually quite dangerous. You know, followed by queen f6. But here the Stockfish tactics get motoring, and we get this move, bishop d3, bang. So putting additional pressure on c2. AllieStein took it. Takes, knight takes e4, still looks quite dangerous here. After all, d takes e4, queen f6 is coming in. But maybe here you can just pause it and try and find the path that Stockfish found to a draw. In actual fact, you can just pause the video, and then we are now going to show the solution, which is a very nice one actually. It's
which is queen to c1 check.
Bang! Rook takes, king a2, and now
knight b4.
So the king's only got one square there. So king b3, and now Black plays
knight
c6.
check.
Exactly. And the king can only retreat to a2, and then knight b4 check is perpetual. And if you go bishop b5, try and escape, run forwards, then you go king there, and rook b4 is mate. So that was a very successful French for Stockfish, and frankly, it played it excellently. I mean, it really played it excellently, played it extremely well. So that was quite, that's, extremely interesting, because, yeah, I mean, we've just been used to Stockfish playing bad Frenches all the time. So, yeah, a very nice game in actual fact from Black. So, but in the other games against Stoofvlees and Allie and Leela rather, Stockfish took on d4, also reasonable. I've played this quite a lot with Black. Queen d2, that's the main move. A6, castles, and now a divergence of paths against Stoofvlees. Stockfish played knight d4, takes, and exchanged everything on d4, which, to be honest, it's a little bit early. You do sort of feel, but yeah, I mean, move order, subtle move order wise, it makes some sort of sense, but in general, you don't really feel that this sort of move is going to be the best one for Black. You just show White so clearly what you're going to do, and then just give White the opportunity to choose his favourite development. Stoofvlees actually did something quite interesting as always. I mean, with Stoofvlees, we call it the Morozevich of the engine world. It's always going to do something unusual. It played this move a3 as well, which is completely not necessary to stop b5 to b4. But its point there was to play this move b4. You do see this. You do see this from time to time, but never normally with the queens on. With the queens on, it feels a little bit risky to weaken the queen side like this. But White is stopping b5 to b4, and also stopping any black pieces from coming to c5. So not such a bad idea. But Stockfish played it very well here. In actual fact, played this move rook b7, which looks pretty subtle. You might not get the idea straight away. It only saw it when Stockfish played it. F5 and knight b8. So this knight is actually fighting for the d4 square. It's going to chase the queen away, and then of course Black's also going to have some counterplay with a6 to a5. So Stoofvlees throws in its rook's pawn, as Natasha said, and then works to...
This is the second engine to have done that.
Exactly. And then works to exchange off that black knight basically to reduce Black's attacking power on the queen side. But this is actually quite an interesting position here. I mean, in principle, Black's light squared bishop is appalling. I mean, virtually all of White's pieces are on light squares here, let alone its pawns. But all those weak dark squares, they could really only be effectively exploited by a knight, for example. With the knights exchanged, White's chances for actually making something of this, visually quite impressive dark square blockade of Black's position are really not that big, especially considering that the queen side is weak, and so Black also manages to generate some counterplay like this with a5, takes, and queen f8, and this weak pawn on a3, weak pawn on h6, they just mean that that White's forces get spread out, defending his weaknesses, its weaknesses rather, and that makes it a lot more difficult to get at Black's weakness, which is the b5 pawn. And also there's this g4 break from White, but Black isn't afraid to take it. You've got, as Mihai Suber once said, bad bishops defend good pawns, and this bishop is doing a great job. And now that you've played g4, the f4 pawn is another target for a queen on f8. It's beautifully placed, this queen, attacking h6, f4, and also x-ray a3 as well. So basically, White's going to find it extremely difficult to make any sort of progress. And Stoofvlees didn't manage at all, and the game was...
It's often the neural nets and also Stockfish find a really safe way of keeping their king, but in this game, White... it doesn't look like there's a sort of really safe square for the king.
No, neither on the king side nor on the queen side. Everywhere you go, you're gonna, when black's counterplay starts, you're going to end up with some sort of problem. So so that was very well played again by Stockfish. You know, a very comfortable draw there. So why couldn't it do it against Leela? Well, we're going to have a little look now at our main game, which is against Leela Zero. So castles, knight b3 from Leela, which is one of the main lines. You know, keeping the some pieces on, some complexity on the board. And here Stockfish played bishop e3. In one of my games from quite a while back, 2010, I played b6, which I do think is the most challenging move in this position. H4, H5. My opponent was Lars Otis, who's a Dutch IM, and the brother of Lennart Otis, who's a well-known Dutch photographer. I think they both played for a while for my local chess club, Amersfoort, although I think they switched to another club later. But so in this game, this was 2010, one of probably my worst ever tournaments I played. But still played some very interesting games, but just ended up drawing huge amounts of games. It was quite I'd never seen anything like it, to be honest. But I mentioned that one of the things I did in this game made me smile, because obviously Allie and also Stoofvlees are playing a3 very quickly, you know, without being provoked or anything. And in this game, this was one of it's maybe even a novelty at the time, or a new idea or something. I played bishop b4, white played h6, g6, a3 and bishop e7, and that was the big idea for me, because I wanted to play b5 to b4 and get some open queenside. So I was spending a tempo in order to do it, whereas whereas Allie and Stoofvlees are doing it just like that. So you can understand probably better now why I'm so dubious about this move a3. But what Stockfish did was it played it the solid way: bishop takes e3. Queen e3 and b5, and while black swapped off the dark squared bishop, so it's only left with its bad light squared bishop. But as always in the French, you know, this pawn center, pawn on d5, pawn on e6, is a very strong barrier to white's play. You know, I mean, for example, the pawn on d5 takes away the e4 square from the white knight. So never too easy for white to make something of this. King b1 from Leela, but now Stockfish plays strangely. I mean, I don't know whether you can say badly, but it does not feel like the way that's really going to be going to be the best way for black to play. You know, simply it just ends up wasting a fair amount of time. So black played knight b6 here. I mean, b4 is really the number one French move that you want to play. Followed by a5 and bishop a6 to swap off the light squared bishops. Got to watch out in such positions that white doesn't have the surprising c4. Again, you know, cutting across black's play and actually trying to do something on the queen side as well. But I think it's probably in this position we're probably not doing too badly. You know, something like b takes c3 en passant. I think we're probably surviving all right there. The other way that you could look at black is to play queen b6, just offering the exchange of queens. Maybe white might play queen h3, but that would be another natural thing to do. What Stockfish does, plays knight b6, h4, rook b8, and then goes knight c4. So obviously, you know, if bishop takes c4, b takes c4, that all works fine, but white's not really going to do that in general. And white plays queen c5, which is an annoying little move. Well, attacking the knight on c6. And it's not easy to drive away that queen on c5. And actually, it's the same general theme as we saw in the game AllieStein, Stockfish, and also Leela Ethereal. You use your major pieces somehow on the queen side to disrupt, you know, black's counterplay. And here black played queen b6. Well, I mean, you can see why I'm slightly dubious about this plan, because you could have gone queen b6 immediately, and here you're playing knight d7, knight b6, knight c4, and then you're playing queen b6. It's true you are going to force the exchange of queens in this way, but still, it doesn't feel like a fast plan at all. Leela went h6, g6, and g3, just a strengthening move, and now black played takes. and knight b6. And again, you sort of feel, oh, you're wasting so much time here. You've gone knight b6, c4, queen b6, and now you're playing knight b6 again. However, I mean, wasting time in the French in these types of positions when you've got the queens off is not necessarily that bad.
I wouldn't want to come in with the knight into e3.
You mean in this position?
Yeah, and swap off the bishop.
Well, the thing is, the more pieces you swap off, the closer you get to a good knight versus bad bishop scenario. And this bishop on f1 is really not doing that much. What Stockfish actually wants to do is to get rid of this knight on c5. So get rid of white's best piece, basically. Exchange that off, and then afterwards just develop normally. So, I mean, in principle, black doesn't mind too much, just as we saw in the Stoofvlees game, having its light squared bishop against white's light squared bishop, because although this bishop is nominally good, white's structure is so solid that black's structure is so solid that that bishop can also get restricted as well. It's the same effect as in the Stonewall Dutch. But yeah, I mean, you really want to exchange off white's knights really in this position, not the white bishop, I think. Yeah, so here white played a3. Just here I understand it. It's stopping black from playing b5 to b4, gaining any space, preventing that bishop from maybe later getting active on a6. And here, just the crucial moment of the game, and Stockfish played a move, a logical move, knight d7, to get rid of this knight on c5. But at this point, all the neural nets, their evaluation jumps, from about 0.3 or something, so slight advantage to white, to plus 1.79, plus getting towards plus 2. Which is, a huge, which for an ends is, it's a huge evaluation basically. The intriguing thing was that even Stockfish NNUE, so that's the neural netified version of Stockfish. It's brand new. It's got a neural net evaluation, and then it adds the Stockfish search onto that. So in principle, the holy grail, I think, of engine chess, I'd say. Very strong as well. So it's also jumped there.
It's a mixture, isn't it, of tactics and strategy?
Exactly. Should be.
And I guess it must be the evaluation bit of the neural net Stockfish that makes the difference.
Exactly, that sort of flags this as a problem. Now, what exactly is the problem? The problem is that knight d7, bishop d7, can be met by knight e4, which was not Stockfish's main move here, but was the main move of all the neural nets. So what is the problem here? Well, the big problem is that if you allow white to get the knight onto f6, then essentially you seem to be pretty much dead. So rook fd8, for example, knight f6 check, king h8. The king's paralyzed on this square, on h8. And all you need to do is to open up a file on the other side, and you'll just be you'll just be laughing basically. And it's something that we saw AlphaZero do a lot in its games against Stockfish. We've got quite a few of those in Game Changer, where you tie the opponent down on one wing and then play on the other. And here Leela plays.
It's always going to be back.
Leela plays.
It's always going to be back rank threats. If you get an open line.
Exactly.
Blacks have always got to worry about that.
Exactly. I mean, and Leela played it very directly. Leela played the move c4, takes. The idea being that if d takes c4, knight d7, and then we'll move the knight out of the way, we're just going to get, just massive back rank threats very, very soon. So Stockfish played a5. Oh, sorry, was this? Yeah, these were in my engine games, but this was Leela against Stockfish in my engine games. And then bishop e2, bishop e8, rook d2, knight e7, g4, and rook c1. And then Leela just followed up with rook c5, rook c2, and it was just winning. I think white won basically every single game that was played from this position. Also, Stockfish as white did a pretty good job. So, really very unpleasant position. I'm just going to show you one other thing. This is what Stockfish did. It was played less directly than Leela, but also quite well. Played g4. Now I'm just going to absolutely whiz past this because it was a very long shuffle game. Sorry, I'm pressing the wrong button there. So, oops, g4. There. Let's have a look. Got to press the right button. Yes. So, just what you'll just notice is that an exchange of knights took place on f6, and Stockfish wasn't at all worried about that. It just let it happen. But the game just shuffled.
This was a Leela Stockfish, one of
my engine games. That's right. Yeah. Stockfish against Leela, I think. So Stockfish was white in this position. But we get into some action now, and it's just very interesting to see actually. So Rook c7, Bishop d1, c4 happened, just breaking things open there. Takes. Rook e5. Rook d5, and the amazing thing here, white's not worrying at all about the exchange of rooks. And black's problem is that black's king can't leave the king side because then an f5 break happens, and then you just end up sacrificing a bishop on g6 and queening the pawn. So black has to just wait, and unfortunately for black, waiting is not a good idea. A very complicated tactical puzzle. If you want to pause here, then you can try and work this out. Almost an endgame study, in actual fact, to win this one. But I mean, Stockfish.
It's very pretty, isn't it? This endgame.
It's extremely pretty. Yeah. I mean, Stockfish, of course, finds it on increments. So you know, it's bishop takes g6. So hg, king d6, and yeah, these pawns are huge. The king's coming into to e7. So black sacrifices the bishop, and then starts pushing the pawns. But check, h7, threatening h8 queen, check, king f6, and the black pawn never made it to queen because queen g7 is mate.
And this is actually a little bit like a game we had in one of our Chess for Life videos where we interviewed Ken Regan.
Oh yes, that's right.
Those two pawns and push one and queen the other in order to queen with check and gain a move that way. So it's a very similar theme to that. And he kind of considered that his best endgame, which was rather like an endgame study.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right. That's true. It's if anyone just to say, we've also got a different channel apart from this Game Changer, a Chess for Life channel, which is based around the book that we wrote, a prize-winning book that we wrote in 2016 about how people's chess styles change as they get older, and you know what you can do to make your chess career last as long as possible. We're doing a series of interviews with slightly older chess players, you know, just to see how they're doing during the coronavirus, and also to tell us about their lives and chess, what chess means for them as well. And yeah, show us a good game as well. And Ken Regan showed us one of his lovely endings against the Hungarian candidate player, very strong player, Laszlo Szabo.
Yeah, we'll put a link up to the.
Yeah, I'll put a link up in the comments. Getting back to this game, we can see that this knight f6 move, allowing knight f6, is terrible for black. But what it seems that Stockfish had misassessed was that this keyline d takes e4. Rook takes d7, rook d8, and the variations are pretty forcing in actual fact. There's not much opportunity for black to deviate, or white in actual fact. Bishop e4, knight e2, rook e1, and bishop b7, and rook e3. And what actually happens in this position, there's loads of ways of getting it. This is just one of them. But we essentially get to a position where I'll do the knight h6, where black has got two potentially, has got one pass pawn, and the f4 pawn can disappear as well. Has got some kingside pass pawns, and white's got some queenside pass pawns. To be honest, from a human point of view, the general rule of thumb that in such positions the bishop is far superior to the knight because it can both support its own pawns and cover the opponent's pawns from a distance, whereas a knight can't do both. It's too short-legged to do that. Really would indicate to you that this is a huge position for white. And the NNs, were just assessing this correctly, of course, but Stockfish not for some reason. So there must have been, some sort of tactic somewhere that it misevaluated or misassessed or missed, and made it think that. Because, for example, in this game, it really was, quite simple. This is one of my engine games, but I mean, white just won all of the games there. Really just a trivial win for white. And it's just interesting to think, well, why would that be? Why would Stockfish misassess, this line, and why would the NNs get it? I was thinking that it's maybe something to do with the way that the machines, the NNs evaluate and Stockfish evaluates. I mean, Stockfish, because you talked a lot about this, didn't you, in Game Changer?
Well, I would think in this situation, this is my theory, is that the NNs very quickly understand that final endgame position is very good for white, and they don't need to calculate a lot of moves to understand that they just know the bishop's going to be better than the knight in that endgame, and so my theory is that would be an evaluation thing, whereas you'd actually need quite a few moves to work it out if you wanted a concrete line.
Yeah. I mean, I also wonder whether if you look at the balance of lines in this position as well, that obviously the NNs their final evaluation is an average of all the lines a weighted average of all the lines that they've looked at, and well, you're seeing a lot of horrific lines for white, with knight f6, or actually the f5 that Stockfish played in the game, and so just in general the position looks very dangerous for black. So the weighted average, the average even of d takes e4 is going to be somewhat higher because all the other lines are so dangerous as well. Whereas of course Stockfish its output is the one best line, the one line it thinks is best, and so it's fragile in a way. It's really relying on perfect calculation to see it, and of course in overtly tactical positions in these mating attacks, and that's just fantastic, because there's if there's a mate in 20 moves, or then Stockfish will find it. I mean, that's no problem at all, whereas the NNs will struggle to do that. But in these sort of endings, where it's not mate or anything, and it's not 100% clear, at first glance, is it winning or not? Certainly for a calculating engine, then it's possible to make mistakes like that. And the funny thing is that in my engine games, obviously they're not running on the top hardware, and it's quite a fast time control, 10 minutes plus 5 seconds. So, maybe not giving Leela the very best opportunity to make the most of this. But if when I made Stockfish play, a move like Rook D8, a solid move like Rook D8, and only then, play Knight D7 later, or just carry on normally, then it was drawing an awful lot of those games. I mean, it was really, I think maybe white wins one or something, but it was also, drawing a lot. Not that it's comfortable, definitely not comfortable, but it was, somehow managing to get some play, get his pieces active, and keep white's pieces at bay. And I mean, the big difference here is that the knight is very well placed on c5, but it's nothing compared to the f6 square. And I mean, also it's a good outpost for the knight, but it's also blocking the c file for white. So it's kind of swings and roundabouts. But it was very, very interesting, a very interesting moment, and it's surprising in a way that a Stockfish, the very latest dev version running on really very impressive hardware, TCEC hardware, could still just miscalculate this. Shows the depth of chess and the just how complex chess can be. Well, here Stockfish, the funny thing is that you give it a couple of moves, and here Stockfish sees straight away that this is a disaster. Sees that d takes e4 is going to be losing, probably even more clearly, I think, somehow now than the NNs, and it played the desperate move f5. So essentially, black's going to give up the exchange. If knight f6, black would just play rook f6, e takes f6, king f7, and then try and hold this position, which is not unthinkable. But white here doesn't bother at all about the material, just goes for the positional advantages. E takes f6, rook f7, knight g5, and bishop h3. And I mean, I think, why is this so horrific for black? I think here, to be honest, you do see a little bit of the effects of black having wasted so much time with knight b6 to c4, queen b6, and then knight b6 to d7. Because white has managed to get in on the king side an awful lot of strengthening and consolidating moves. So it's had time to move the pawn to h6, and it's played the move f4, which holds back e5, and it's had time to cement that with g3. You know, if somehow black had wasted less time, you'd be in a position where white still had to play g3, you know, something like that, and black would then have...
Not going to be able to dislodge any of that, really, like the pawn on h6,
no,
on g5, or the pawn on f4.
No, that's right. I mean, Mihai Marin talked in one of his videos once about how Russians always play for stable pieces. And, well, I mean, this is, you know, such a good example. I mean, all of white's pieces are, you know, you can just nail them into the black position, really, and they're just never going to be moved. So Stockfish played knight e7. Its evaluation had, you know, gone completely down by now. And a very nice little tactic here from Leela, again making use of this e4 square. Rook f7, knight c5. I'm reading a book about centralization, actually, and about being able to use the center in order to get to the wings. And I think this is a beautiful example, you know, because we've had this move knight e4. First of all, using the center and bringing the knight over to the king side, and then afterwards we're stepping back to e4 and coming over to the queen side. And here actually this just wins a pawn because we're forking e6 and a6, and the bishop on d7 as well. And the bishop on h3, of course, is combining with the pawn on e6. So we get probably about one of the world's worst good knight versus bad bishop endings here. Yeah, this is really quite horrific. And Leela has no difficulties whatsoever winning this game. And does it with remarkably little shuffling. There's a new feature of Leela that was actually added for the super final, which is called MLH, which is, oh good lord, is it moves left hand, I think, or something like this. Moves left head, that's the one. And essentially that's, it's kind of calculating, as far as I understand it, it's calculating the number of moves left to the end of the game, and it's giving precedence to the moves that reduce that. So basically it gives precedence to the quickest win. And well, we saw in the super final.
That feature, was that developed mainly for the spectators?
I don't know. It's supposed to add ELO as well, because I suppose there was the feeling that in some positions Leela runs too close to the 50 move rule, and then suddenly starts panicking and opening things up at the wrong moment. So so the idea was to reduce that. And to be honest, I think we noticed the benefits of that, because in the super final it finished off you know, a couple of better positions very, very smoothly, very impressively. So that's actually quite nice. They were debating though whether this feature was quite heavy and whether that was slowing down the rest of Leela. You know, that was one of the things they were wondering about. But there was also the thing about it is a nice feature indeed for the spectators. You're absolutely right. You know, it makes it look much nicer, but obviously you don't want it to affect Leela either. But it again, it finishes off quite nicely. Only a tiny little bit of repetition, but that's allowed. That's the Russian way. You always say, from a position of strength, you repeat moves. So what is White going to do here? Well, White's got loads of plans, but actually doubling up with the rooks on the C file and invading there is quite a good way, quite a good start. So Stockfish basically is desperate by now, and in such positions it starts, well, often giving away material just to try and free its pieces. But well, then Leela's job is very simple, just to pick up the pieces and just improve the position of its pieces. And Rook C5 is a pretty good one. Rook B7, Rook D2, maybe threatening D5. The Rook goes to C8. Rook to D3, very nice, just defending the pawns on A3 and G3. And I mean, what would white do? Well, white might even look at bringing the king into h4, g5, f6. You know, I mean, that could also be a very good thing. Black's, you know, white's position is completely impenetrable for black. Here, Stockfish took the rather radical decision to give up the exchange. Rook c3, rook there, rook g1, g4, and here black played fg, but then the TCEC rules kicked in, and the game was adjudicated a win. White's simply going to play rook g4 and then go rook g7, and we'll just win the whole house basically. So there we are. I hope you enjoyed that overview of the French Steinitz through Stockfish's eyes. And as I said, I think we saw some impressive games from Stockfish. You know, I think against AllieStein and against Stoofvlees, and but we also saw this this kind of puzzling mistake against Leela, where I think it just shows, you know, probably that's one of the difficult things in the French. You know, just assessing those different endings, and you know, from that point of view, a fantastic evaluation function, you know, which is what the NNs have, is probably more trustworthy than very, very deep calculation, you know, which is you know, at that depth, you know, can always make mistakes in the evaluation of a difficult ending, for example, at the end. And also quite intriguing that Stockfish NNUE, the neural netified Stockfish, got that right, you know, which sort of then you sort of think, well, you know, maybe this could really work, you know, to ally the two, and you know, really get the best of both worlds. You know, very intriguing, these developments. You know, really looking forward to that.
Do you know, does the Stockfish neural net like the French defence as well?
I don't know. I'll have to have a look.
We'll have to look out for it.
Was it playing the French defence? I'm not sure. I'll have to have a look at those games. That's a good question. Yeah. It's but for the moment, it's just going to be. It looks like the TCC doesn't want two Stockfishes running in the divisions and all that. So it's just going to be the.
They might collude, I suppose. They might, you know, work out whether they need to draw.
Exactly. So there's only going to be one of them running in the official tournaments. That's going to be the normal Stockfish for now, of course.
Normal one, not the neural net.
They're the normal one. But so, you know, for now, the Stockfish and NUE is in all the bonuses. But it's been very interesting to see it play. There we are. So, well, I hope you enjoyed that. If you haven't subscribed yet,
please subscribe.
Indeed, help us get up to 5,000 subscribers.
5,000 at least.
At least. And well, if you haven't seen our book Game Changer, do take a look at that. Loads of interesting games, loads of these themes. This way of handling the French for white, moving the pawn to h6, trying to dominate the opponent's king. You know, loads of stuff in there like that. So please do take a look. And otherwise, you know, keep well, keep safe, and thanks for watching.
Thank you for watching.